This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Stein. It's a zchus to be in your Beis HaMedrash, and I want to be mavarich the Rav. They should have continued Siyata D'Shmaya in this Makom Torah, in the yeshiva, and in all of his endeavors. He should continue to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, to be Marbetz Torah. I have heard the name of the Rav in many circles, and he has many admirers wherever his Torah reaches. And we wish the Rav continued success in Siyata D'Shmaya in all of his endeavors. Tonight's Shiur is being dedicated in the memory of not only a good friend of many of the members of this shul, but actually a cousin of mine, Dr. Brian Galbut, Rav Baruch ben Rav Ruven Nassan, Zechrona Livracha, who, despite my own observance, I'm told that if there are 10 people in the world who were like Brian, then the world would be a very special place. Aside from being a very renowned cardiologist, he was an individual who would wake every morning before the crack of dawn, and he was davuk to the Torah like a gadol b'Yisrael. And we're confident that Chazal tell us, actually the Rekeach writes, that at the end of the davening on the Yom Naram we say, Hayom ta'amtzeinu, Hayom t'varcheinu, Hayom t'gadleinu l'toiva, Hayom t'drashenu. 7 times, 7 expressions. Where do these 7 expressions come from? So the Rekeach writes, the 7 Hayoms are Keneged, V'yatem, Hadveikim, B'Hashem, Elokeichem, Chayim, Kolchem Hayom. That we hope on this day of Rosh Hashanah, we hope to be Mezdabek to Elokim Chayim. And by clinging to Elokim Chayim, we are confident that Rebbeinu Shalom will give us a year of Chayim. So we are also confident that Rabbi Brian, who spent his whole life davuk to the Torah, and as the Rav mentioned, when one is davuk to the Torah, one is davuk to the Shechina, and so to speak, it obviates in a way the need for tshuva. In fact, if I can mention, there's an astounding Chida. Chida writes on the Gemara in Yuma on Daf Pei Vav. The Gemara in Yuma says there are Daled Chilukei Kapara. There are 4 levels of Kapara. The Gemara says if somebody violates an asay and you do tshuva, then you get automatic kapara. You don't even need Yom Kippur. And the Gemara says that if a person violates a lav, so then tshuva is toile, and then Yom Kippur is mechaper. So the truth is, you only need Yom Kippur for lavin, but Yom Kippur doesn't help for everything, because the Gemara continues that if somebody violates a kares, chas v'shalom, then tshuva is toile, and Yom Kippur is toile. And chas v'shalom, a person needs other ingredients to wipe away the avera. A person would perhaps need yisurim, the Gemara says. And then chil Hashem, tshuva can't wipe it away, Yom Kippur can't wipe it away, even yisurim ad yom hamaves. Says the Chida hafla v'fela, that if somebody is oisek b'Torah l'shma, you don't need tshuva, you don't need Yom Kippur, you don't need yisurim, you don't need misa. Torah alone is mechaper for the chamuros, the Chida writes. And the Bnei Yissaschar writes, even though we don't understand where did the Chida get this from, it's against Sugyas Hashas. Bnei Yissaschar writes, since the Chida paskins this way, bebezdin shalmala, kach paskinon bebezdin shalmala. That's the psak of the Chida. Again, this indicates this concept that Torah, in a way, if a person learns Torah properly, it obviates the need for teshuvah. I want to share with you a very incisive question. This question comes from a rare sefer. The name of the sefer is Emek Yehoshua of Rabbi Ezel Charif. Rabbi Ezel Charif asks as follows. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Daf Tezayin, the Gemara brings the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Adam Nidain B'chol Yayim, that a person is judged every single day. So Frek Rabbi Ezel Charif, if we're judged every single day, what are we getting so worked up about on Rosh Hashanah? So we come to shul and we're swaying and we're shuckling and we're crying, we're not crying, we're making believe we're crying, but we get into it. We take it very seriously. What are we getting so worked up about on Rosh Hashanah? Adam nidam b'chol yom. Every montag and danishtik, the Rebbeinu Shalom is judging us. Every day the Rebbeinu Shalom is judging us. So why are we so serious on Rosh Hashanah? What's the difference between Rosh Hashanah and the daily judgment, according to Shitas Rabbi Yossi, of Adam nidam b'chol yom? So I want to examine a phrase in the Rosh Hashanah davening. We're very familiar with it, But when we focus on it, we'll notice that it seems to be out of place. We say, Kiyata shohimeya kahoyel shofar umazen teruah ve'ein doimelach. You, Ribbon Hashem, you hear the sound of the shofar. You're attentive to the truah. Ve'ein doimelach, and there's no one like you. No kidding. No kidding. Why do we have to inject that expression, ve'ein doimelach? There's no one like you. We know that already. The truth is, it's like a random thought. Ve'ein doimelach. You could stick the words ve'ein doimelach in any given tefillah that we say throughout the day. Moida'ani lefanecha melachai v'kayam ve'ein doimelach. Asher yotzar asana v'chachma ve'ein doimelach. Ma toivu elecha Yaakov ve'ein doimelach. It's random. Baruch shamar v'hoya ha'olam ve'ein doimelach. Poiseach es yadach zelchot ve'ein doimelach. What's it doing in the middle of Musaf? Ve'ein doimelach. We know that already. Especially in light of the fact there's a halachic principle that we need ba'inon me'ein hachasima samach l'chasima. That right before the conclusion of a bracha, we need to end off with the subject of the chasima, so that the idea mentioned right before the chasima will flow seamlessly into the chasima. So what does v'yein doimelach got to do with shoymea kol truas amo Yisrael barachamim? What's v'yein doimelach doing there? So we could say simply that there's a concept that is really introduced by the Beis HaLevi, and the Brisker Rav speaks about it, and is developed by Rav Soloveitchik, that there's a concept that Tkiyah Shofar is not just a Maisa Mitzvah, it's not just an act of a mitzvah like shaking a lulav, where we lift up the lulav and we shake it and we're Mekayim a mitzvah, but actually the blowing of the shofar is an effect of a prayer, a type of tefillah. And there are many interesting supports to this concept, most notably the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Chavav, where the Gemara says you cannot use the shofar of a cow, of a par. Because the Gemara says when you blow that shofar, you don't want to remind the Ribbon Shem of the Chet Ho'egel, in Kategar Nasa Sanegar. Just like the Kohen Gadol would not wear Big Day Zahav when he did the Avodah on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara asks, wait a second, the Kohen Gadol didn't wear Big Day Zahav, he only didn't wear Big Day Zahav, Lifnai v'Lifnim. But the Avodah Shebechutz, he wore the Big Day Zahav. So where exactly are you blowing the shofar? You're taking the Baal Tekeh, you're stuffing him in the Aron Kodesh, open up the doors, stuff the Baal Tekeh and close the doors. Baal Tekeh is not blowing the shofar in the Lefnai v'Lefnim, he's blowing it at the Bima. The Bima is like the Mizbech HaKtoros, the Mizbech HaZav, the Tshuva and the Chasam Sofer, but it ain't Lefnai v'Lefnim. So if there's only concern of in Kategar Nasa Sanegar, when the Kohen Gadol is Lefnai v'Lefnim, but when he's doing the big day, when he's doing the Avodah Shebechutz, he's allowed to wear Big Day Zahav. So why can't the Baal Tekeh blow the horn of a cow? So the Gemara uses a very unusual expression. The Gemara says, Kivan de l'zikaroinu kebifnim dami. Since you blow the shofar to remember, therefore it's like you're blowing it lefnai v'lefnim. But what does that mean? What does that mean, since you blow the shofar to remember? It's as if you're blowing it lefnai v'lefnim. So the way I like to say it over is that there's an interesting halacha in Shulchan Aruch, which I think is very overlooked. We all know the Shulchan Aruch says that when you daven Shemona Esrei, you need to be mechavein keneged Eretz Yisrael and a mechavein keneged Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim. So if you ask most people, you stop 1,000 people on the street, what does the Shulchan Aruch mean when he says you should be mechavein keneged Eretz Yisrael and keneged the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Say, you need to face Eretz Yisrael and you need to face the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So please tell me, if you're standing in America and you're facing Eretz Yisrael, aren't you automatically facing the Kodesh? How do you face Eretz Yisrael and not face the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So the Mishnah Berurah says that's not what the Shulchan Aruch means. Contrary to what everybody in the world thinks that the Shulchan Aruch is saying, there is no halacha in Shulchan Aruch to face the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Doesn't exist. Shulchan Aruch never said that. When the Shulchan Aruch said to mechavin keneged beis kodesh hakadoshim, he means you need to have in mind when you daven Shemona Esrei that you're standing in the kodesh hakadoshim. How's that for a halacha in Shulchan Aruch? That means there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that when you take the 3 steps back and then you take 3 steps forward, You need to imagine yourself that you're virtually standing in the Holy of Holies. So when I saw that halacha, I was like, maybe I'll be Mekayim Shemona Esrei one time in my life. I finally understood the halacha. That means, this is what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. It's not a hidur. It's not halacha. It's halacha in Shulchan Aruch. You need to imagine yourself standing lifnai v'lifnim. Therefore, since shofar is not just a ma'aseh mitzvah, but it's a prayer, it's a tefillah, and the way you pray is you imagine yourself standing in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Therefore, the laws of shofar are governed as if you're standing lifnai v'lifnim, and therefore you cannot use the shofar of a par. You need to use the shofar of an ayil, because ein kategar nasa sanegar. Here's a good one. Anybody know where are hilchos slichos in Shulchan Aruch? Which siman? There's a good way to remember this. I once went to a shiur of Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef in Queens. I used to be a rabbi in Queens. So he gave a shiur for Sfardim. First of all, wouldn't it be nice if before, let's say, you spoke, they had chazonim and menagnim. So they had Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, they say, speaking at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, you have chazonim, you have bali nagunim. 10 o'clock, after all the chazonim finish, they're opening acts. When Rabbanim speak by the Sfardim, they're opening acts. Anyway, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said, he posed the following question that nobody knew the answer to. He said, does anybody know where in Yeridea Hilchos Dagim are? I don't know, I was learning for Smicha that I didn't remember. He said, what? Nobody knows. He says, Siman Pei Gimel, Rashi Tevois, Gefilte fish. He says, that's what the Gemara says, that you have to make simanim to help you remember where things are. He went through a whole list of simanim he had. Reish Samach Gimel, it's Hilchos Hadlakas Neiros, there's a Shita Reb Sadia. He had 10 different simanim. So my siman is, Hilchos Slichos are in siman Taf, Kuf, Pei, Aleph. Taf, it's a tough time of the year. And Kuf, Pei, Av, you need a lot of coffee, right? So that's how you remember it. But the Mechaber says in siman Taf, Kuf, Pei, Aleph, listen to this. Noyagim lokum ba'ashmoiras loymar slichos v'tachnunim me'rosh chodesh Elul ad Yom Kippur. There's a minhag to get up early to say slichos from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur. That's the Mechaber. So Sfardim have to wake up for a month, and they wake up early to say slichos every day. Listen to the Ramah. Haga uminhag b'nei Ashkenaz eino kein. We don't do this. What do? We blow shofar in the morning during Rosh Chodesh Elul. It's a very interesting Ramah. The Ramah is going on the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, Sfardim say slichos for a month. So all the Ramah should say, we don't do that. Why does the Ramah have the need to say, but we blow the shofar? As if one thing has to do with the other, it has nothing to do with it. The Ramah should just say, we don't say slichos, and finished. As if the Ramah is saying that our blowing of the shofar takes the place of saying slichos. How does blowing the shofar take the place of slichos? So we see this Yesod again. That shofar is not just a ma'aseh mitzvah. It's not just a custom. It's a form of a prayer. It's tachanunim. It's a tza'aka. So the question is, what is the shofar saying? What is the tefillah of the shofar? And perhaps there's an idea that because merubim tzarchei amenu, because we have so many needs, and there's so many things we need to ask for, and we can't even begin to articulate what we need. We need parnasa, we need nachas, we need gesund, we need health, we can't even, for this one, for that one, for this relative, for that friend, for this kehila. We have so many things we want to ask for, so the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us a great gift. He gives us the shofar. The shofar is, so to speak, the unarticulated cry of the heart, where we can't even summon up the verbiage to express everything that we need. So what we do is we just cry, as the Beis Halevi says, me'umka deliba. We bypass the channels of the vocal cords. We bypass the mouth and the palate, and we just cry out. And the Rebbeinu Shalom then has to decipher and uncover all of the needs that are being articulated in this unarticulated cry. Who could do such a thing? How does Rebbeinu Shalom have the ability to detect in the sound of the shofar all of these myriads of requests that we're making? So that's what we say. Ki ato shomea kol shofar. You hear the sound of the shofar. Umazin trua. Ve'ein doimelach. There's no one like you. You could do this. Only you, Ribbon Shem, are able to hear that raw cry and decipher in it what every Jew is asking for, what every Jew wants, what every Jew needs. Even if we ourselves are not cognizant of what our needs are. Sometimes you stand in Shemona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah, we can't even begin to articulate all the things that we need. But the Ribbon Shem, so to speak, probes the inner recesses of the heart, and he is able to detect in the sound of the shofar all the myriad requests we are asking for, and we don't even know that we need to ask for. But there's a deeper dimension in these words, Ve'ein doimelach. Why did Chazal, why did the Anshe Knesset Agdola formulate that in middle of the conclusion of shofaros, we stick in, we inject these words, Ve'ein doimelach? Let's take a look at the Torah. If you take a look at number 7, the Torah, and also in Siman Tav Kuf Pei Aleph, the Torah also employs a very interesting expression. The Torah is describing our procedure on Erev Rosh Hashanah. The Torah says that one would expect on Erev Rosh Hashanah we should be gripped with terror and fear. If somebody was put on trial for a capital offense and their life was on the line, it's unlikely they would have the wherewithal to groom themselves, to dress well, to present themselves in an elegant way. And yet the Torah says our custom is on Rosh Hashanah, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, we bathe, we take a haircut. Says the Torah, Al Pi the Medrash, Am Reb Simon Ksiv Kimi Goy Gadol, Reb Chanina v'Reb Yeshua Imrim, Ezo Uma K'Uma Zu. Who is like Klal Yisrael? Sheyoidas Oif Yashal Elekeha, who knows the procedures of their God. Says the Torah, Min Hagoy Shaloilam, Adam Sheish Leidin, Loivei Shechayrim, Umasatev Shechayrim, someone who has a court case, would don black clothing, would wrap themselves in black clothing. Megadol Zakenai would grow their hair. Eino Choytech Tziparnav. Lefi She'eno Yodea Ech Yetzei Dina, they don't know what the outcome will be. Aval Yisrael Einon Kain. We're not like that. Loivshim Levanim, Mesatfim Levanim, Umagalchim Zakanam, Umachadchim Tziparneim, V'oichlin v'shoisim usmechem. We eat, we drink, we rejoice. Listen to the Torah. Lefi sheyoidin shakadosh baruch hu yaseh lohem nes. We are confident that God will perform a miracle. Now, aside from the fact that it would seem the last emotion that we would exhibit on Rosh Hashanah is confidence. After all, the Gemara says that one of the things that is completely remote and hidden from a person is the Oimek Hadin. I mean, we say Malachim Yechafezon. So how could the Torah say we're confident? But we're going to focus on one word of the Torah. The Torah says we are confident Shahakadosh Baruch Hu Yaseh Lohem Nes. We are confident the Rebbe will make a miracle. What miracle? What's the Torah talking about? A miracle? There's no miracle on Rosh Hashanah. The miracle happens on Pesach, on Sukkot. There are no miracles on Rosh Hashanah. The Torah should say, we're confident God will give us a good judgment. We're confident in the verdict. We're confident in the outcome. But what in the world does the Torah mean? Yaseh Lohem Nes. What miracle? There are no miracles that are taking place on Rosh Hashanah. Let's come back to the words Ve'ein doimelach. As we mentioned, you could technically say Ve'ein doimelach anywhere in davening, but Ve'ein doimelach has a very specific connotation. Every single time Ve'ein doimelach appears, it refers to one particular ability of the Ribbon Shalom. Now, the Ribbon Shalom has many great abilities. So I was just reading that a child in utero, a baby in utero, so it doesn't breathe on its own. It doesn't get oxygen through its lungs. It gets oxygen through the umbilical cord. So in the baby, the question is, does the heart need to pump the blood to the lungs? After all, its lungs are not functioning. So it doesn't. In a baby in utero, the blood goes to the right ventricle, and then it doesn't pump it up to the lungs. It goes from one side of the heart to the other side of the heart. How does it get there? There's actually a hole in the baby's heart where the blood passes through one side to the other. The question is, so what happens when the baby is born? Because how long could a person exist with a hole in their heart? And the answer is, so how does the baby survive? Well, very simply. The moment the baby is born, it takes a breath, it cries, it creates a pressure cavity in the heart, and the heart is sealed shut. Now, if the heart doesn't seal shut, the baby has to have a surgery, which is sakonas nefashos. But the Rebbe Shem says, no problem. Just cry a little bit. The heart seals on its own. It's amazing. Every time a child is born, that's what happens. Ein doi melach. No, not ein doi melach. We don't apply that miracle and say ein doi melach. That's pretty good, Rebbe Shem, but we don't call that ein doi melach. Ein doi melach only refers to one particular miracle of the Rebbeinu Shalom. There are 2 times in davening that we apply the words umi doi melach v'yein doi melach. In Ata Gibar, we say Micha Moicha Baal Gevurais Umi Doime Lach. Umi Doime Lach refers specifically to the Rebbeinu Shalom's ability to be Mechaye Mesim, to resurrect, to revivify the dead. The Gemara in Gittin says a person could have drowned. His atoms, his molecules could have been spread through the corners of the universe. Says Rebbe Shem, Mi basha and ashiv, I will collect and reconstitute every atom and cell and molecule and recreate the person. That's umi doi melach, the miracle of Tchias HaMesim. Micha moicha ba'al gevurois umi doi melach. Where else do we use this expression? In Berchas Yotzerar. Ein karkecha, yein zulasecha, efes boltecha, umi doi melach. So we've identified that the 2 places in davening where umi doi melach v'yein doi melach appear is specifically in the connotation of Tchias HaMesim. And therefore, there's a beautiful sefer, the Sefer Az Yashir, written by a good friend of mine, Rav Moshe Schwerd, who's a prominent attorney and Chashav Talmud Chacham in Kew Gardens Hills. He quotes Rav Moshe Shapiro. The Rav Moshe Shapiro says that if Chazal utilize the expression v'yein doi melach in the bracha of Shaifaros, they are clearly referring to this specific ability of the Rebbeinu Shalom to be mechaye mesim. And now the question is, why are we referring to the miracle of Tchias HaMesim in Min Drinin, the end of the bracha of Shaifaros? Kiato shemea kol shofar umazin trua v'yein doi melach. Rebbeinu Shalom, you could be mechaye mesim. Baruch atah Hashem shemea kol truas amo Yisrael barachamim. And the answer is we have a fundamental misunderstanding what takes place on Rosh Hashanah. We think we come to the Rebbeinu Shalom on Rosh Hashanah, say Rebbeinu Shalom, Tavshin Ayin Tes, it was a good year. I was alive, I was well, I made a living, I had a family. Rebbeinu Shalom, keep it that way. Or maybe stay out of my business, and let's leave things just the way they've always been. Please don't meddle in my affairs this year. Don't shake the boat. Because I got what I got. I know what's in my account right now. I know the situation of my family. I know my health situation. Rebbeinu Shalom, just stay out of my business and things will be great in Tavshin Pei. Because I'm the muchzak. There's a status quo, I have a presumptive status that whatever I need I have, so just leave it that way, please. But says the Shulchan Aruch, no, that's not how it works in Rosh Hashanah. Shulchan Aruch writes in Siman Reish Chaf Hey number 8, if you see your friend after 30 days, you make a shechiyanu. Okay, we don't do that anymore because there's so many modes of communication that we assume that if anything would have happened to your friend, you probably would have heard about it within milliseconds, within nanoseconds. You would have found out what happened to your friend. But the Shulchan Aruch continues. Shulchan Aruch says, what if you haven't seen somebody in 12 months? Shulchan Aruch says you make the following bracha: Baruch atah Hashem, mechayeh hamesim. Blessed are you, God, you revive the dead. So Mishnah Berurah wants to know, why do you make a bracha of mechayeh hamesim after not having seen somebody for 12 months? So Mishnah Berurah quotes the Marsha. And the Marsha says very simply, because if you haven't seen someone in 12 months, they've passed through a Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, the pshat is not that you were alive, and on Rosh Hashanah we're asking God, please continue the status quo. You stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom on Rosh Hashanah like a mess, like an ani, like somebody with no mishpacha and no family. Ani ve'evyoin arum kemeis mamish. And we don't say, Rebbeinu Shalom, continue what I have. Rebbeinu Shalom, give me life. Be mechaye mesim this year. Rebbeinu Shalom, give me family. Give me friends. Give me parnasa. I'm an ani ve'evyoin. I'm not a chai and continue the status quo. I have nothing. Rav Shlomo Hyman, Rosh Yeshiva of Tarvadas, would say with great emotion what he heard his Rabbi, the Granat, say over the first night of Slichos. The Granat would say over, say the pasuk, Kedalim uchurashim dafaknu doasecha. Like a poor man, we knock on your door. What does that mean, like a poor man, we knock on your door? We don't knock on your door. Rebbeinu Shalom, look, right now my portfolio is just fine. The stocks were good this year. Business was good this year. Stay out and Tavshin Pei. Just leave it that way. We come before the Rebbeinu Shalom with not a penny, with not a source of income, with not a source of livelihood, with not a source of life, and we literally beg the Rebbeinu Shalom not to continue the status quo, to grant everything we are comfortable with, but we shouldn't be comfortable with. So what's taking place on Rosh Hashanah is not a continuation, but is a virtual Techias HaMesim. In Shul, when we're standing in Shul on Rosh Hashanah, we're asking the Rebbeinu Shalom to resurrect us because we stand before Him as a mess. The lease is over. Rav Moshe Shapiro quotes the Ari that the Rebbeinu Shalom never grants more than 1 year at a time. It's not that the Rebbeinu Shalom decided, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years, you're going to live 70, 80, 90 years. Every year it's a 1 year lease. Every year it's a 1 year lease on your job, on your family, on your well-being, on your livelihood, on your mishpacha, on your life. There's a miracle that takes place on Rosh Hashanah. And the miracle is the miracle of Tchias HaMesim. Ki ata shoymea kol shoifar, umazin teruah, v'ein doime alach, Rebbeinu Shalom, you could do it, you're the only one who could do it. Says Rabbi Zela Charif, yes, Adam Nidain B'chol Yom. Every day the Rebbeinu Shalom judges us. When Rebbeinu Shalom judged me today, I was able to say to the Rebbeinu Shalom, look, Rebbeinu Shalom, I have a job, I have a family, I have health, just keep it that way. The onus is on you to extract me, who's the muchzuk, on everything I have. You could apply the rule, HaMoitzi Mechaveiro Yolav Haraya. But on Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbeinu Shalom is not the moitzi. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the muchzak on the neshama. We're the moitzi to prove we should get another year. We become the moitzi. Maybe we're the marikama, but we're not the muchzak. The laws of presumptive status change on Rosh Hashanah. Today, on Tesvav Elul, Tezayin Elul, we're the muchzak. On Rosh Hashanah, it's al chayenu hamasurim biyadecha. But we ask the Rebbeinu Shalom ve'ein doim alach, and we're confident the Rebbeinu Shalom will perform a miracle for us. That's the unique status of the din of Rosh Hashanah. All bets are off. It's an interesting thing. What is the main theme of Rosh Hashanah? What is the zechus that we invoke more than any other zechus? What is the event that we drum up time after time after time? The Gemara says, on the second day you read about the Akedah. The Gemara says that you blow the shofar of an ayil to remember Akedas Yitzchak. We talk about Akedas Yitzchak in the davening. Why do we do tashlich? The Ramah quotes the Maril. We go to tashlich to remember Akedas Yitzchak for no other reason. When Avram Avinu went to do the Akedah, Chazal say the Satan came in the guise of a river and tried to stop Avram Avinu until he cried out, Hoshienu kivo umayim ad nafesh. The purpose of Tashlich, according to the Ramah, citing the Maril, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes this as well, is to invoke the zchus of Akedas Yitzchak. I'll tell you Meiri, amazing Meiri. Zeh chalifasi, zeh tmurasi, yeah, the whole thing. Well, what in the world are you doing? Oh, I'm giving the chicken my averos. That's what I'm doing. Where does that come from? Since when could you give chicken your averos? I'm giving the chicken. I'm being maknet to the chicken my averos. Which kinyan are you using? Chalipin, Hagbah. How exactly? What's the transfer? So listen to this Meiri. Meiri says, yeah, the original custom was not chicken, it was not money, it was not fish. The Meiri says it was a ram. Obviously, that's not a very convenient custom. There's enough trouble with all those boxes of chickens. Imagine if there were, boxes of rams in Coney Island Avenue. Meiri says we used to use a ram. Why? To commemorate Akedas Yitzchak. Because Avram Avinu, when Rabbi Hashem said, "Don't shechti Yitzchak," Hashem told Abraham, "Okay, here's the aisle. I'm going to show you the aisle, and every act that Avram Avinu wanted to do to Yitzchak, Rashi brings. He said he did it to the aisle, and he says this should be in lieu of Yitzchak. So Avram Avinu performed the first kaparos. Kaparos, in other words, he did to the aisle what he wanted to do to Yitzchak. So we do that to invoke the zchus of Akedas Yitzchak. That's what the Meiri says. Kaparos is. Shani el roish v'loy lezanav. The Mechaber says use the roish of a keves. Why? Akedas Yitzchak. So everything is all about Akedas Yitzchak. Why are we so busy with Akedas Yitzchak on Rosh Hashanah? Oh, because it happened on Rosh Hashanah, right? Yeah, really. Very interesting. Where does it say that? It happened on Rosh Hashanah? Yeah, there's a psikta that says it happened on Rosh Hashanah. There are many midrashim that say it happened on Yom Kippur. So how come we're not busy with Akedas Yitzchak on Yom Kippur? The Medrash Rabbah doesn't say it happened on Rosh Hashanah. And Medrash Rabbah doesn't say it happened on Yom Kippur. The Medrash Rabbah says it happened Pesach. You know anybody who does tashlich on Pesach, who does kaparas on Pesach, who blows a shofar on Pesach? Why are we so busy with the Akedah on Rosh Hashanah if it didn't happen on Rosh Hashanah? What does Akedah have to do with Rosh Hashanah? So the Sefer Oz Yasher brings really a novel and an exhilarating explanation for the connection between the Akedah and Rosh Hashanah. And that's very simply, contrary to what perhaps you were taught in yeshiva, that what happened at the Akedah was that Avraham Avinu took the knife and he was about to shecht Yitzchak, and Yitzchak said nothing. Yitzchak said, "Okay, go for it." And Hashem said, "Don't do it." So Avraham retracted and Yitzchak walked away happily ever after. Who says that account? Nobody. That's not what happened. By the account of most midrashim, Yitzchak died. The Shibalei Haleket brings down, if you look at number 12, Shibalei Haleket brings that the 18 brachas of Shemona Esrei are actually a historical account of world history, where when Avraham Avinu was saved, Meor Kazdim, the Malachi Ashares cried out, "Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Avraham." And when Yitzchak was nekad al gabei hamizbeach, what happened to Yitzchak? Nasa deshen, he became ashes. V'haya Eifarai mushlach al Har HaMoriah. His ashes were scattered on Har HaMoriah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the dew of Tchias HaMesim and he brought him back to life. This is what David refers to when he says, Kital Chermoin Hayord al Harei Tzion. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, when the knife reached Yitzchak, Parcha v'yatsa nishmasai. By the way, definitely don't want to get into this subject right now, but there are 5 Orachaim HaKadoshes who get into this concept that before the Akedah, what is Yitzchak called? V'hinei ben L'Sara. And after the Akedah, it's Yitzchak ben Avraham. Why before the Akedah is Yitzchak attributed to Sarah, and after the Akedah, Yitzchak is attributed to Avraham? Because, says the Orachaim HaKadosh, Yitzchak had a switch of gender of his neshama, and that's why he wasn't able to have children before the Akedah. And then Parcha Nishmasai, and he had a new neshama. The Orachaim writes about this about 5 times in the end of Vayera, in the beginning of Chayei Sarah. So this is a well-established idea. Parcha Nishmasai. Yitzchak died. Whatever this means. Says the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mechaye Yitzchak Avinu ba'isasha Pasach v'Amar Baruch Atah Hashem Mechaye HaMesim. The Shibbolei Haleket says that when Yitzchak was Neschaya, when Yitzchak was brought back to life, he said, is a raya tchias hamesim in our Torah. He said, Baruch atah Hashem mechayei hamesim. What's the first example of tchias hamesim in the Chumash? Akedas Yitzchak. What's the shoyresh of the kayach of tchias hamesim? Akedas Yitzchak. What do we hope for on Rosh Hashanah? We hope for the miracle of Umidai Malach. And what brought that miracle into Olam Hazeh? What programmed Tchias HaMeisim as a possibility for this world? Akedas Yitzchak. So on the day that what we are hoping for from the Rebbeinu Shalom is that He literally resurrect us and revivify us, we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, we know You could do it. The shoyresh of this great miracle that we hope for today is Akedas Yitzchak. We don't only mention it because it happened. Not everybody agrees it happened on Rosh Hashanah. It's not only a great zechus, it is the central theme of the day, where we stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom on Rosh Hashanah, Kemeisim, Kedalim, Ka'aniyim, and we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, Umidoi Melach. You could do it. You did it to Yitzchak Avinu. We're confident You're going to do it to us. There's a Kaf HaChaim that Reb Shneir Kotler would say over every year in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. If you look at number 16, the Kaf HaChaim, in the second to last line, the Kaf HaChaim draws an analogy between the 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur to the Arboim Yom Shel Yitziras Havlad. The same way, even though the baby develops over 9 months, but the primary formation takes place in the first 40 days. The organs develop, the gender is determined in the first 40 days. There's a connection between that concept and the 40 days between Rosh Chodesh Elul and Yom Kippur. What's the connection? What's the meaning of this analogy? So Rabbi Yerucham Oshen continues this theme that we're mentioning, that the Medrash tells us, the Yalkut Shimoni tells us, if you look at number 18, V'Rabbanan Amrin, Elu hadoyroi shehim kemeisim b'ma'aseyem u'baim u'mispalalim lefanecha b'Rosh Hashanah v'yom HaKippurim v'yata boirei oisam beria chadasha. That not only, says the Medrash, do we stand before God on Rosh Hashanah without a muchsuk, without a claim, without a presumptive status on our lives, on our families, on our livelihood, but even spiritually speaking, we know there's a concept, Rishoyim b'chayeyim nekroyim meisim. The wicked, even when they're alive, they're considered as if they're dead. So we too say before the Rebbeinu Shalom, we are not even alive spiritually. We stand before You like a mess spiritually. And we ask You, please, revitalize us, revivify us, resurrect us. It's very interesting. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in his commentary to Shemona Esrei, he says, in what bracha should you be mechavein to ask for siyata d'shmaya to be able to do tshuva? So, Hashivenu Avinu l'sarasecha. No. Says Rabbi Yonasan in the Aras Davash, in the very beginning of the Sefer, when you say the bracha of Ata Gibar Li'olam Hashem Mechaye Meisim Ata, that's when you should be mechavein to ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to resurrect you, to revitalize you, to revivify you, even in a spiritual sense. The kavana of tshuva. Tshuva, the ability to do tshuva, is nothing less than the greatest miracle in the world. You know, the Yerushalmi tells us that they asked the Chachamim, what should be the verdict of somebody who does an Aveira? So the Chachamim said, he should die. And they asked the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im said, he should die. And they asked the Torah, and the Torah said, I don't know, if someone doesn't have Aveira, let them bring a carbon. And they asked the Ribbono Shel Olam, and the Ribbono Shel Olam said, do tshuva. That means tshuva is not even an eitzah or an opportunity that a chacham, a navi, or even the Torah could give. Tshuva comes from the highest place. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's like one of those keys that only the Rebbeinu Shalom has access to. Tshuva and Tchias HaMeisim. Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, it's no wonder that there's a man by the name of Eliyahu HaNavi. And Eliyahu HaNavi will usher in 2 eras in history. Eliyahu will usher in the era of Tshuva, and Eliyahu will usher in the era of Tchias HaMesim. How does Eliyahu do both? Tshuva and Tchias HaMesim. That's what tshuva is. Tshuva is literally a resurrection of the neshama. Tshuva is the revivification of the neshama. When do we start slichos? There are 3 or 4 shitas in the Rishonim. The Torah brings down a daya that you start Rosh Chodesh Elul. The Torah brings down an opinion, Aseres Yemei Tshuva. The Torah brings down an opinion that you start the Sunday before Rosh Hashanah, unless Rosh Hashanah comes out less than 4 days before Sunday. The Gra says no. I don't agree with these Perushim. The Gra quotes the custom of Barcelona. The Gra quotes the Ran, that in Barcelona they began to say Slichos on Chaf Hey Elul. Why Chaf Hey Elul? Because it's the first day of creation. Okay, so because Rebbeinu Shalom created the world on Chaf Hey Elul, now I have to lose 40 minutes of sleep? So Rebbeinu Shalom created the world. Why do I need to get up early on Chaf Hey Elul? Because Rebbeinu Shalom created the world then. What does the creation of the world got to do with my Slichos? But apparently, what we're learning is that the 40 days of tshuva are literally corresponding to the 40 days of Yetziras Havlad. We're recreating ourselves, we're resurrecting ourselves. And the time that we start is Chaf Hey Elul, the first day of creation. And the Gra even says that our custom to start on Sunday is not in contradistinction with the minhag of Chaf Hey Elul. It's only that since Chaf Hey Elul could come out on different days of the week, we prefer always to start on the Sunday closest to Chaf Hey Elul. So it's not that we don't start Slichos on Chaf Hey Elul. We do. We just choose the first day of creation, which was Sunday. So who's the Navi of Tshuva? Who's the prophet of Tshuva? We read about him on Yom Kippur. Yoina ben Amittai. He's the one who could tell even the Gentiles, do Tshuva. Who's Yoina ben Amittai? Who is he? So the Malbim identifies Yoina ben Amittai. He's the son of the woman who sustained Eliyahu. And he's the boy who died. And he's the boy who Eliyahu brought back to life. Interesting. The Navi of Tshuva is the Navi who experienced Tchias HaMesim firsthand. He's the one who could tell the world that Tshuva works. Because if he didn't experience Tchias HaMesim, it would be impossible for him to say that Tshuva works. Because here he's going to talk to Am Yisrael. He's going to talk to the Ummah Ha'olam. They're going to say, we're Mesim b'chayenu. We're like we're dead. Our actions are as if we're dead. We're so dirtied. We're so sullied. We're so bogged down. It is impossible to ever resurrect our souls. So Yonah says, it happened to me physically. Tchias HaMesim in HaTorah. So you could do tshuva. Only Yonah could bring the message of tshuva to the world. The Sefer Razeh Yonah points out it is Yonah who experienced Tchias HaMesim firsthand. He is able to bring the world the message of tshuva. So there are many dimensions of Tchias HaMesim that take place on Rosh Hashanah. We stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom. We don't feel like we're a muchsak, not on our lives, not on our livelihoods, not on our health, not on anything we have. We are physically like Mesim. We are emotionally like Mesim. We are spiritually like Mesim. But at the same time, we're very confident. We know that we trust in the Rebbeinu Shalom. That there's nobody else who could do this. Nobody else who could revivify us physically. And nobody else who could help us recover the purity of our soul. There's a place up in the Shamayim where the Nevi'im don't understand and the Chachamim don't understand. And Kiviyachal, if we could say, even the Torah cannot give us this advice. Doesn't say anywhere in the Torah really to do tshuva. Tshuva, is it even a mitzvah? The Rambam seems to apply, tshuva is not even a mitzvah. The Arizal writes that if you look through the Nevi'im, when the Navi talks about tshuva, often the Navi will substitute the Hebrew word for Aramaic. The Navi will sometimes use the word Esayu, the Lashon Aramis, because the Rebbeinu Shem is trying to hide the ability to do tshuva even from the Malachim because nobody understands it. It's a key that only the Rebbeinu Shem maintains. It's the key of Tchias HaMesim. But it's a key that we're confident that the Rebbeinu Shem will give us access to. And when we blow that shofar, and when we remember Akedas Yitzchak, the very first Tchias HaMesim in history, we're not just invoking this great schus, we're invoking the miracle that was brought down to the world on that fateful day, that the Rebbeinu Shem could take a person out of any predicament, a predicament of physical death, emotional death, spiritual death, and the Rebbeinu Shem could sprinkle on us the dew of Tchias HaMesim and give us a year of Chayim, a year of livelihood, a year of Nachas. And this is a miracle that we're confident in, and we say very joyously, Ki ata shomea kol shofar, umazin teruah, v'yein doim elach Rebbeinu Shem. There's no one like you. You could resurrect us physically and in all elements. And may the Rebbeinu Shem answer the koil of the shofar and answer all of our tefillos, to be mevarech all of us and all of our families, and this kehillah befrat. And we should be zaycha to shnas chayim v'shalom lanu l'chol Yisrael. Amen.
Rabbi Glatstein's farm.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.